My name is Bianca Harrington. I'm 18 years old. And before you decide what kind of daughter you think I am, before you picture me as spoiled, dramatic, ungrateful, understand this. I didn't wake up one day and choose war with my own parents. They chose it first. They chose it the moment they looked at my future and decided it was a down payment on my brother's happiness. Great Aunt Victoria Harrington used to say our family carried its stories like bruises. Some people covered theirs with laughter. Some covered them with church hats and perfect Sunday smiles. Victoria didn't cover anything. She was the most incredible woman I've ever known. Born in Alabama in the 1920s, raised in a world that treated girls like property and black girls like they weren't even worth naming in the first place. She watched her own mother get pulled out of school at 14 to marry a man who already had a full-grown life and needed a wife like you needed a mop. Victoria told me that was the moment she learned a girl's dreams could be stolen quietly, not with violence, not with screams, with paperwork, with family decisions, with people saying, "This is just how it is." While the women around her were expected to find husbands and have babies, Victoria packed one suitcase, got on a bus, and left. She moved to Chicago and became one of the first black women to earn a medical degree from Northwestern. But she never forgot where she came from. Every Christmas, she'd sit us down, me and my female cousins, like she was briefing soldiers before battle. She'd tell stories about the brilliant women in our bloodline who never got to become anything except somebody's wife, somebody's cook, somebody's shadow. Then she'd look at us with that fire behind her eyes and say, "Not you girls, you're going to have choices." That wasn't a cute speech to her. That was a vow. So she set up education funds for every girl in the family, not the boys. "They get their opportunities handed to them anyway," she'd say, smiling like she'd already seen how our family worked. "But you girls, you need someone willing to fight for you before the fight even starts." When I graduated from Lincoln High School in Detroit with a 3.8 GPA, I felt like I was carrying Victoria's legacy in my backpack. I'd done everything right. AP classes, volunteer shifts at the local hospital, late nights studying while my friends partied. I wanted to become a nurse like Victoria, steady hands, calm voice, saving people in the moments they couldn't save themselves. The plan was simple. Use Victoria's gift to attend Wayne State University, graduate debt-free, and start my life without chains. So that sunny June morning, I walked into Chase Bank dressed like the future was already mine. I had my acceptance letter, my enrollment paperwork, my whole heart beating so loud I could hear it in my ears. Mrs. Walker, the teller, greeted me with a warm smile. She typed in my information, clicked twice, and her expression changed. Not confusion, not a minor hiccup. It was the face people make when they've just opened a door and found a body on the floor. "Miss Harrington," she said carefully, "I'm showing a balance of $47,000 in your education fund." My stomach dropped so fast I swear I felt it in my knees. "That can't be right," I whispered. "There should be almost 200,000. Mrs. Walker's eyes flickered over the screen again, like she wanted the numbers to rearrange themselves out of mercy. "I see multiple large withdrawals over the past 18 months, she said. "The most recent was 3 months ago, 8,500. The room tilted. I gripped the counter because my hands suddenly didn't know what to do. "Who made those withdrawals?" I asked. And even as I said it, something inside me already knew. Mrs. Walker hesitated. "According to our records, your parents had joint access to the account as co-trustees until you turned 18. Co-trustees. Those words didn't just hurt. They rearranged my entire understanding of who my parents were. Victoria trusted them. She trusted them to protect my future. And they treated that trust like a spare credit card. I stumbled out of that bank feeling like I'd been punched in the throat. In the parking lot, I sat in my beat-up Honda Civic and stared at the steering wheel until my vision blurred. I tried to build excuses for them because that's what daughters like me do. Maybe they moved it to another account. Maybe it was a bank error. Maybe there was some complicated reason that ended with them surprising me. But the farther I drove, the hotter the anger got, until it was boiling under my skin like a fever. I pulled into my parents' driveway with my hands shaking. Inside, Mom was in this kitchen making her famous sweet potato pie like it was any other day. Dad was in the living room watching the Tigers game, beer in hand, relaxed, too relaxed, for someone who'd just stolen the ground from beneath his daughter. They looked up as I walked in, and neither of them looked surprised to see I was breaking. "We need to talk," I said. Dad muted the TV with an annoyed sigh, like I'd interrupted something important. "What's got you all worked up, Bianca?" "My college fund," I said, and my voice cracked on the last word. That's what. I threw the bank statement onto the coffee table. Someone want to explain why there's only 47,000 left when there should be almost 200,000? Mom and Dad exchanged a look. Not a confused look, a prepared look. A look that said they'd known this day was coming and hoped I'd be too soft to fight. Mom wiped her hands on her apron. Honey, we can explain. Oh, I'm sure you can, I said. Where's my money? Dad cleared his throat. We needed it for Brandon's wedding. You know how important that day was for our family. For a second, I couldn't speak, because my brain kept trying to translate his words into something less evil. But he meant exactly what he said. Brandon's wedding. My brother's absurd, over-the-top wedding to his college girlfriend, Amber, at the Detroit Athletic Club. The wedding everyone still talked about like it was a royal event. The wedding with centerpieces that looked like they belonged in a movie. The wedding that cost more than some people make in 2 years. I stared at my father like he'd just confessed to burning down my room. You spent my education money, I said slowly, on a party. It wasn't just a party, Mom snapped, defensive now. It was your brother's wedding day, a once-in-a-lifetime event. The Hendersons are respected in this community, and Amber deserved a wedding that honored that. What about what I deserved? I shot back. What about the education Great-Aunt Victoria wanted me to have? Dad stood up, jaw set in that stubborn way that meant he was done seeing me as a person. Family comes first, Bianca. Always. Victoria would have understood. No, I said, and my voice rose like a siren. She wouldn't have. She made that fun because she knew what it felt like to have your dreams stolen by people who thought they knew better. Dad's eyes narrowed. Watch your tone, young lady. I laughed, sharp and bitter. Did you really just say you raised me better than that? Because the parents who raised me wouldn't steal from their own daughter to make their golden boy look good. Mom's eyes filled with tears. The same tears she used like a weapon whenever she wanted me to fold. Bianca, we're still your parents, she whispered. We love you. We'll figure something out for college. Figure something out, I repeated, tasting how empty it was. You stole my future, and now you'll figure something out? Are you going to magically make $150,000 appear? They didn't answer. They just stared at me like I was the problem, like I was dramatic for refusing to smile while being robbed. That's when it hit me, cold and final. They genuinely believed they'd done nothing wrong. In their minds, Brandon's happiness mattered more than my entire life. I swallowed, feeling something inside me harden into a shape I didn't recognize yet. I'm done, I said quietly. I'm done pretending this family cares about me. And I walked out of that house knowing I would never see my parents the same way again. Because the people who were supposed to protect me had stolen from me and expected me to thank them for it. I didn't go back to my parents' house that night. I didn't even circle the block like I used to when I was upset, driving nowhere, hoping my anger would run out of gas before I did. I drove straight to Zoe's apartment because my body knew, before my mind could admit it, that my home wasn't safe anymore. Zoe opened the door in pajama shorts and an old college sweatshirt, hair piled into a messy bun. The second she saw my face, her expression changed. Bianca, she whispered. And that was it. Something in me snapped loose. I walked past her into the living room and folded in half, like my ribs couldn't hold me upright. I tried to explain, but the words came out tangled, choking. Zoe didn't pepper me with questions. She just sat beside me and rubbed slow circles on my back the way you do, for someone who's drowning but doesn't know how to ask for air. When I finally got it out, bank statement, 47,000, wedding withdrawals, my father's voice saying, family comes first. Zoe's jaw clenched so hard I heard her teeth click. Oh my God, she said, they really did it. They didn't even flinch, I whispered. They looked at me like I was ridiculous for being upset. Zoe's eyes went shiny with rage. Bianca, that's not just wrong. That's theft. But the word theft made my stomach twist, because a quieter voice inside me, the trained voice, the one raised on guilt and obedience, kept hissing. Maybe they had the right. Maybe you're overreacting. Maybe this is what daughters do. They sacrifice. I slept on Zoe's couch that night, but I didn't really sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my parents' faces, calm, certain, almost bored, as they confessed to gutting my future like it was a harmless family choice. By morning, Zoe had already told her parents. Mr. and Mrs. Williams lived in a modest brick house not far from downtown, warm, tidy, full of the kind of stability my own home had only pretended to have. They'd known me since I was 12. They'd fed me dinner when my parents forgot I was waiting at school. They'd clapped the loudest at my graduation. Mrs. Williams sat me at their kitchen table like I was precious glass. She slid a plate of eggs in front of me that I couldn't touch. I want to be very clear, she said, voice tight. What your parents did is shameful. Mr. Williams, quiet, steady, shook his head like he couldn't believe adults could behave that way. They used money that was specifically designated for your education, he said. That's not just a family disagreement, that's a legal issue. I blinked at him. Is it, though? They were co-trustees. The bank said they had access. Access isn't permission to misuse, he replied. Trust accounts have purpose, rules, fiduciary duty. I stared at the table, nails digging into my palm. So you think I can do something? Mrs. Williams leaned forward. Sweetheart, you have to do something. If you don't, they'll learn they can take anything from you and call it love. That line hit me harder than anything else, because it was true. They'd already trained me to accept disrespect as family personality. They'd taught me silence was maturity. They'd raised me to be grateful even when I was being erased. And now they were testing how well the training held. Zoe sat beside me, her knee bouncing with anger. My dad knows someone downtown, she said. A woman who does estate stuff. She's legit. My throat went dry. Like a lawyer? Mr. Williams nodded. Rebecca Martinez, estate attorney, one of the best. The name landed like a door opening. Not comfort, not peace. A path. That afternoon, Zoe drove me to an office building with sleek glass windows and a lobby that smelled like polished wood and expensive perfume. My hands were sweating so much I kept wiping them on my jeans. A receptionist smiled and asked us to take a seat. I stared at the wall art, abstract paintings that looked like storms trapped inside frames, and tried to breathe like I wasn't about to do something that would split my life in two. Because that's what it felt like I was standing on a cliff and one step forward meant I could never go back. Rebecca Martinez didn't keep us waiting long. She walked out herself, mid-50s, sharp eyes, tailored suit, hair pulled back like she didn't have time for nonsense. She looked at me like she could already see the whole story in my posture. Bianca Harrington? She asked. I stood too fast. Yes. Come in, she said. Tell me everything. Her office was neat, calm, almost intimidating. Books lined the shelves. A framed certificate hung behind her desk. A small photo sat near her computer, Rebecca in a cap and gown beside an older woman who looked proud enough to burst. Something about that photo made me think of Victoria. The same earned pride, the same grit. Rebecca sat, clicked her pen, and pointed to a chair. Start from the beginning. So I did. I told her about Great Aunt Victoria, about her vow, her fund, her speeches at Christmas. I told her how hard I worked, how sure I was that future was waiting for me like a door I'd finally earned the right to open. I told her about the bank, Mrs. Walker's careful voice, the withdrawals, the word co-trustees cracking open my chest. I told her about my parents' kitchen, Mom's sweet potato pie, Dad's beer, the way their faces didn't even twitch when they said my brother's wedding mattered more. Rebecca took notes without interrupting, her expression getting tighter with every detail. Every so often, she'd make a small sound, something between disapproval and anger, like she was filing each betrayal into a drawer labeled consequences. When I finished, my voice was hoarse and my eyes burned like I'd been holding tears back for days. Rebecca set her pen down. This, she said, is a breach of fiduciary duty. I blinked. It is? It's clear, she said. The funds were designated for a specific purpose, your education. Trustees are obligated to act in the beneficiary's best interest and follow the intent of the trust. Your parents used it for personal expenses. That's misappropriation. My heart beat hard enough to shake my ribs. So I have a case? Rebecca nodded once. You have an excellent case. Zoe exhaled sharply like she'd been holding her breath the whole time. But Rebecca didn't smile, not yet. Instead, she leaned forward slightly, her gaze steady and serious. The question isn't whether you can win, she said. The question is whether you're prepared for what comes next. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? Suing your parents will change everything, she said plainly. Your family will turn against you. Your community will take sides. People will call you heartless. They'll say you're greedy. They'll say you're destroying your parents. It will get ugly. Her words weren't meant to scare me. They were meant to prepare me. And they worked, because suddenly I could see it. Christmas dinners without my name on the invite. Church whispers. Cousins looking through me like I didn't exist. My mother's tears turning into public performances. But then I thought about Victoria. About her voice. Not you girls. You're going to have choices. About the women she told us about. The ones who sacrificed their dreams because family demanded it. And I realized something that made my hands stop shaking. If I backed down, I wasn't just losing money. I was agreeing with the oldest rule in my family. Girls give up, boys get celebrated. I lifted my chin. I'm ready, I said. Rebecca's mouth softened into the smallest smile. Good. She slid a folder across the desk. Because we're going to make them pay back every penny, plus interest, plus legal fees. My breath caught. Interest too? If they wanted to avoid that, Rebecca said calmly, they should have returned what they stole before we had to drag it into court. Zoe's fingers squeezed my arm. I didn't realize I'd started crying again until I tasted salt. Not grief. Relief. Hope. Sharp and dangerous. Like a match struck in a room full of gasoline. When we left Rebecca's office, the sun outside looked the same as it had that morning. But my life didn't. I sat in Zoe's car and stared at the folder in my lap, my name printed neatly on the top. Plaintiff. The word made my throat tighten. That evening, my boyfriend, Daniel, called. Daniel had been with me a little over a year, steady, calm, the kind of man who listened with his whole face. When I didn't pick up right away, he texted, Zoe said you're with her. Are you okay? I stared at the screen until it blurred. Because I didn't know how to explain to someone who loved me what it felt like to realize your own parents loved you conditionally. When I finally answered, Daniel's voice was soft. Bianca, talk to me. So I did. Not the polished version, not the brave version, the raw version. He didn't interrupt. He didn't try to fix it with cliches. He just said quietly, I'm here. And then, like the universe couldn't resist twisting the knife, my phone buzzed with another notification while he was still on the line. A name flashed across the screen that I hadn't seen in months. Maya Ellison, Daniel's ex-girlfriend. My stomach dropped again, the same sick plunge I'd felt at the bank. Because the timing wasn't random. It never is. I didn't answer Maya's message, but I saw it. And something inside me whispered a warning I couldn't ignore. When people sense you're vulnerable, they circle. That night, lying on Zoe's couch, I held Rebecca's folder to my chest like armor. My parents thought they'd taught me to stay quiet. They thought I'd come home eventually, crying, begging, ready to be forgiven for my attitude. They didn't know I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. And once you cross it, you stop being their daughter. You become their enemy. The lawsuit didn't creep through my family. It exploded. By the end of the first week after Rebecca filed the paperwork, it felt like Detroit itself had an opinion about who I was supposed to be and how badly I was failing at it. The calls started first. Aunt Denise rang my phone at 9 a.m, her voice already tight with accusation. Bianca, what is this nonsense I'm hearing? I didn't bother pretending I didn't know. It's not nonsense, it's the truth. You're suing your parents, she snapped, like saying it out loud might shame me into backing down. Over money. It's not about money, I said, even though my throat ached with how often I had to explain that. It's about them stealing what wasn't theirs. Aunt Denise scoffed. They're your parents. They fed you, clothed you, kept a roof over your head. Don't you think you owe them something? I don't owe them my future, I replied. And Great Aunt Victoria didn't sacrifice her life savings so they could throw a party. She hung up on me without saying goodbye. That became a pattern. Family members called in waves. Some angry, some pleading, some pretending to be neutral while dripping guilt into every sentence. Cousin Marcus tried to play mediator, his tone gentle but loaded. Look, B, I get why you're mad, but suing Mom and Dad, that's cold. I tried talking to them privately, I said. They told me to get over it. But think about what this is doing to them, he pressed. Dad's blood pressure is through the roof. Mom can't sleep. They're talking about mortgaging the house. I closed my eyes. Then maybe they should have thought about that before spending $150,000 that didn't belong to them. Silence. Then Marcus sighed. You've changed, Bianca. This isn't who you used to be. He was right. I used to be the girl who stayed quiet so everyone else could be comfortable, I said. That girl is gone. He didn't call again. The generational divide was brutal. Older relatives whispered about me like I'd committed some unholy sin. Younger cousins texted me late at night, saying things they'd never say out loud around their parents. I'm proud of you. I wish I had your courage. Don't let them break you. At church, people hugged me with stiff arms and tight smiles. Mrs. Patterson, the same woman who used to sneak me extra cookies at bake sales, crossed the grocery store aisle to avoid me. But then Ms. Rodriguez, my old high school guidance counselor, stopped me in the parking lot one afternoon. I heard what you're doing, she said quietly, and I want you to know I'm proud of you. I blinked, surprised. Most people aren't. She smiled sadly. That's because most people have been trained to confuse obedience with virtue. Those words stayed with me, because that's exactly what my family was demanding. Obedience. The worst call came 2 weeks later. A knock on Zoe's apartment door, sharp and insistent, like whoever was on the other side already felt entitled to be let in. I opened it and froze. Brandon, my older brother, the golden son. He looked awful. Dark circles under his eyes, shoulders slumped, like the weight of the family's shame had finally decided to land on him. For a split second, my chest tightened. Then I remembered the ballroom, the crystal chandeliers, the centerpieces, the way he'd smiled while my future burned. Bianca, he said, we need to talk. I almost closed the door, but curiosity won. I stepped aside. He sank onto Zoe's couch like he'd run out of strength halfway through the walk up the stairs. You're really doing this, he said. You're really going to destroy our family. I folded my arms. I didn't steal from anyone. It wasn't just a party, he shot back. It was my wedding day, the most important day of my life. And my education was the most important thing in mine, I said. But that didn't matter to you, did it? Brandon rubbed his face. I didn't know they were taking your money. I stared at him. You really expect me to believe that? I thought they had savings. You didn't ask. I didn't think... No, I interrupted. You didn't. You just accepted it. Because in this family, someone else always pays the price so you don't have to. He went quiet, staring at the floor. After a long moment, he looked up. What if I paid for your college? The words hit me like a gust of air after being underwater. You would? I asked carefully. Yeah, he said quickly. Amber and I, we're doing okay. I could take out loans, help you out. For one fragile second, hope flickered. Put it in writing, I said. His head snapped up. What? If you're serious, put it in writing. A legal agreement guaranteeing the money. His face changed, like a switch had flipped. You don't trust me? Should I? I asked softly. I'm your brother, and your wedding is the reason I'm here. My word should be good enough. I shook my head. Your word doesn't protect me. Paper does. His jaw tightened. You've become cold, Bianca. No, I said. I've become careful. He stood abruptly. You're ungrateful. And just like that, the last illusion shattered. After Brandon left, Zoe handed me a glass of water. My hands were shaking. You okay? She asked. I nodded, even though something in me felt permanently bruised. That night, Daniel came over. He sat with me on the couch, quiet, present. For a while, it felt like I could breathe again. Then his phone buzzed. I wasn't trying to look, but I saw the name, Maya Ellison. Again. He noticed my eyes flicker and stiffened. She's just checking in, he said too quickly. She heard about your family stuff. My stomach tightened. She didn't hear it from me, I said. Daniel hesitated, and in that hesitation, doubt crept in. She's worried about you, he said. She knows how stressful legal battles can be. Something sharp cut through my chest. Because I didn't need Maya's concern. I needed boundaries. I don't want her involved, I said quietly. Daniel frowned. You're already dealing with so much. Don't turn this into another problem. Another problem. Like my discomfort was an inconvenience. Like I was supposed to swallow that too. I'm not asking you to choose, I said carefully. I'm asking you to protect us. He nodded, but his eyes didn't fully meet mine. And that scared me more than if he'd argued. Because I was learning a brutal lesson all at once. Some people only feel comfortable loving you when you're easy. As the lawsuit dragged on through the summer, my world split cleanly in two. Those who thought family loyalty meant accepting whatever you were given, and those who understood what it meant to have your future taken without permission. The loneliness was relentless. I was uninvited from my cousin's graduation party. I found out about my grandfather's 80th birthday on Instagram. People I'd known my whole life looked through me like I'd died. But then there were the messages, quiet ones, from women who'd sacrificed themselves and never been thanked, from girls who saw themselves in my fight, from people who understood that what I was doing wasn't cruelty. It was survival. And as the pressure mounted, as the whispers got louder, one thing became terrifyingly clear. My family wasn't going to stop until I was small again, and I was done shrinking. By the time summer settled in, my name no longer belonged to me. It belonged to whispers, half-truths, and versions of myself I didn't recognize. My parents had stopped calling directly. Instead, they let the story travel for them. Through church groups, neighborhood barbecues, workplace conversations, anywhere sympathy could be harvested. I started hearing it secondhand. Your parents are heartbroken. They're saying you're being manipulated by your lawyer. Your mother cries every night. Your father says you're too young to understand what you're doing. Rebecca warned me this would happen. It's a classic strategy, she said during one of our meetings. If they can't win legally, they'll try to win morally. And they were good at it. My mother told anyone who would listen that they were only trying to help Brandon start his marriage the right way. That they never imagined I'd be so selfish about it. My father went further. At his job, he framed me as unstable, too emotional, too influenced, too modern. He talked about outside voices poisoning my mind, like I'd joined some rebellion against parental authority instead of hiring a lawyer to retrieve stolen money. It worked. Church members cornered me after Sunday service, voices hushed and heavy with judgment. Forgiveness is more important than money, Bianca. Don't let pride destroy your family. They're good people who made a mistake. I smiled. I nodded. I went home and cried until my ribs hurt. Because what they never asked, what no one ever seemed interested in, was why my parents felt entitled to take something that wasn't theirs in the first place. Rebecca prepared the case methodically. Victoria Harrington's will, bank records showing the withdrawals, invoices from the wedding venue, the catering, the decorations, dates, amounts, signatures. Every document told the same story. Intentional misuse, no ambiguity. Still, the night before the hearing, I almost broke. I lay awake on Zoe's couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying memories that suddenly felt like propaganda. Birthday cakes, family vacations, Dad teaching me how to drive, Mom brushing my hair before school plays. I wondered if I was cruel, if maybe love really did mean letting people hurt you and calling it sacrifice. Daniel lay beside me, quiet, his arm around my waist, but even that felt fragile now. Maya's name kept appearing in his notifications like a test I didn't want to take. He insisted it was harmless. I insisted on distance. We were both pretending it wasn't a crack. The morning of the hearing, I wore my best suit, the one Rebecca helped me choose. Structured, clean, professional. Armor. Wayne County Courthouse loomed downtown, all stone and authority. As I walked in beside Rebecca, folder clutched to my chest, I felt like every step echoed with the weight of generations. My parents were already seated at the defendant's table. They looked smaller than I remembered. Older. For a flicker of a second, guilt rushed in, hot and disorienting. Then I remembered my father's voice. Family comes first, and how easily he'd said it while burning my future. The hearing lasted 3 hours. My parents' lawyer argued discretion, necessity, family obligation. He painted the wedding as an investment in unity, in reputation, in tradition. Rebecca dismantled it piece by piece. The will is explicit, she said calmly. The funds were designated exclusively for educational advancement. Trustees do not get to reinterpret intent when it becomes inconvenient. Judge Patricia Chambers listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. When she finally spoke, her voice filled the room with quiet authority. The evidence clearly shows the defendants violated their fiduciary duty as trustees by using funds designated for educational purposes to pay for personal expenses. The plaintiff is entitled to full restitution of the misappropriated funds, plus interest, plus reasonable attorney fees. I didn't breathe until Rebecca squeezed my hand. I had won, completely, unequivocally. The final judgment totaled $197,000. Principal, compound interest, legal fees. Enough to cover my education, enough to secure my future, enough to destroy my parents financially. The victory didn't feel the way I expected. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow. Because within days, the narrative shifted. Not was Bianca right, but how could she do this to them? My parents took out a second mortgage to pay the judgment. The house, the one where I'd grown up, where holidays and birthdays and memories lived, became collateral. She took their house, people whispered. She should have stopped once she got her money. What they didn't know, what my family never told anyone, was that Rebecca had offered multiple settlement deals. She'd even offered to waive interest and fees if my parents returned the principal early. They refused. They insisted they'd done nothing wrong. They chose the damage. My mother called the day after the ruling, sobbing so hard I barely understood her words. "Are you happy now?" she cried. "Is this what you wanted?" "I didn't do this to you," I said quietly. "You did this when you stole from me." "We gave you life," she screamed. "We raised you, loved you." "And you stole from me," I replied. "Love doesn't give you ownership." She hung up. We didn't speak again for months. That fall, I moved into my dorm at Wayne State University. New city blocks, new routines, new future. But every night, lying in that unfamiliar bed, I wondered what winning was supposed to feel like. I had secured my education. I had proven I wouldn't be erased. And I had lost my family, my community, and the version of myself that believed love was unconditional. Some nights, Daniel held me and promised we'd be okay. Other nights, Maya's shadow crept between us, uninvited and unresolved. I didn't know yet that my family wasn't finished with me. I only knew this. I had crossed the point of no return, and nothing would ever be simple again. 6 months into my first semester at Wayne State, I started to believe the worst of it was behind me. That was my first mistake. I was finally settling into a rhythm: classes, late night study sessions, clinical volunteer hours at the hospital. I learned which campus cafes stayed open past midnight and which professors actually cared whether you understood the material or not. From the outside, it probably looked like I'd won. From the inside, it felt like I was living in the quiet after an explosion. Everything still standing, but coated in ash. That's when my family came back. Not with apologies, with expectations. It started with Brandon. I almost didn't answer when his name flashed on my phone. We hadn't spoken since the courtroom, since he'd watched the judge rule against our parents and walked out without looking at me. But something in me, old reflexes maybe, picked up. "Bianca," he said, his voice strained, "we need to talk." I leaned back against my dorm room desk, staring at the cinder block wall. "About what?" "Mom and Dad are struggling," he said. "The mortgage payments are killing them. Their credit is shot. They're talking about selling the house." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said. And I was. I didn't want them homeless. I didn't want them ruined. There was a pause, then, "You got what you wanted," Brandon continued. "You have your college money back. Maybe you could help them out, just until they get back on their feet." I closed my eyes. "You want me to give them money," I said slowly. "The same money they stole from me." "It's not all about you, Bianca," he snapped. "Think about the family, about their legacy." "I am thinking about legacy," I replied. "Great Aunt Victoria's." He scoffed. "You're being vindictive." "I'm being careful," I said, and ended the call before my hands started shaking. 2 weeks later, my father called. I almost didn't recognize his voice. It was softer, tired, like someone who'd finally realized yelling wasn't working. "Bianca," he said, "I know things haven't been good between us." That was an understatement. "We've been doing a lot of thinking," he continued, "about the lawsuit, about everything that happened after." My heart betrayed me and jumped. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the apology. "We want to make things right," he said. I held my breath. "We talked to a financial counselor," Dad went on, "and we think the best way forward is to combine our resources as a family." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "A shared account," he said quickly. "A family fund. Everyone contributes. Everyone helps each other when they need it." Silence filled my room. "You want me to put my settlement money," I said carefully, "into an account you'd have access to." "It would be a gesture of good faith," he replied. "A way to show family comes first." I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. "Dad," I said, when I could breathe again, "do you remember why we went to court in the first place?" "That's in the past," he insisted. "We need to focus on the future." "The future where you can touch my money again," I said. "No." His tone hardened. "You're holding grudges." "I'm holding boundaries." He accused me of being unforgiving. I reminded him trust is rebuilt with actions, not access. We hung up worse than we started. After that, the requests multiplied. An aunt hinted she needed help with medical bills. A cousin asked if I could loan him money for his car. Another relative joked, half serious, that I was the rich one now. It was like blood in the water. Everyone suddenly remembered I existed, now that I had something they wanted. The breaking point came at Christmas. Against my better judgment, I went to my grandmother's house. I told myself enough time had passed, that maybe we could coexist without detonating. I was wrong. Aunt Denise cornered me in the kitchen while I was drying dishes. "You know," she said, voice syrupy, "I've been thinking about your parents' situation." "I'm sure you have," I replied. "There's a solution where everyone wins," she continued. "You could buy their house, pay off the mortgage, let them live there rent-free." I stared at her. "You want me to buy my childhood home," I said, "with the money they stole from me." "It's not stealing if it's family," she said lightly, "and it's a great investment." "Everyone wins," she added. "Everyone except me," I said. That was the moment it clicked. My family would never stop. They didn't see me as a daughter who'd been wronged. They saw me as a resource, a pool of money they felt entitled to redistribute. And no amount of explaining, or pleading, or winning in court would change that. That night, I drove back to campus with my hands tight on the wheel, heart pounding with clarity instead of rage. I knew exactly what I had to do. And I knew it would leave them stunned. I didn't make the decision all at once. It came together slowly, in fragments, between anatomy lectures and late-night walks across campus, between moments when my phone stayed silent and moments when it lit up with another family request disguised as concern. At first, I told myself they were just panicking. Mortgage stress does that to people. Fear makes them forget history. Fear makes them bold. But the pattern became impossible to ignore. They weren't asking how I was doing. They weren't asking if school was hard, if I was sleeping, if I was lonely. They were asking what they could get. Brandon texted again, softer this time. Maybe we got off on the wrong foot. Mom's health isn't great. An aunt sent a Facebook message filled with prayer hands and Bible verses before sliding in a request for temporary help. Even my grandmother hinted, carefully, gently, that families are supposed to share blessings. Blessings. Like my future hadn't been nearly erased. I started letting calls go to voicemail. I started answering texts days late. And in the quiet that followed, I realized something unsettling. When I stopped being useful, the concern stopped too. Daniel noticed before I said anything. "You're pulling away," he said one night, sitting on the edge of my dorm bed while I highlighted notes I wasn't actually reading. "I'm tired," I replied. That was true, just not the whole truth. He hesitated. "Your family, they're not letting this go, are they?" I shook my head. "They never will." There was a long pause before he spoke again. "And what about us?" That question hit harder than any demand for money. Because we were still standing, but barely. Maya had stopped texting him as often, but the damage lingered. Trust, once shaken, doesn't snap back into place just because the shaking stops. "I need stability," I said quietly, "not more people asking me to prove my worth." Daniel nodded, slower this time. "I want to be that for you." "I know," I said, "but wanting and being aren't always the same thing." The final call from my parents came in early spring. My mother didn't cry this time. That alone told me everything. "We've been thinking," she said, voice controlled, "about what you did with the lawsuit." What I did, not what they did. "And?" I asked. "We realize maybe we went about things the wrong way," she said carefully. "But we're still family. We still believe what's yours should help all of us." There it was. No apology. No accountability. Just entitlement dressed up as reconciliation. "We don't want money," she added quickly. "We want unity." I closed my eyes. "Unity doesn't require access to my bank account," I said. She sighed like I was being difficult. "Bianca, why are you punishing us?" That question, "Why are you punishing us?" finally snapped the last thread of doubt. They didn't see consequences. They saw cruelty. They didn't see theft. They saw disobedience. I hung up without answering. That night, I went for a long walk around campus. The city hummed around me. Cars. Voices. Life moving forward whether my family approved or not. I thought about Victoria. About how she didn't just save money, she created intent. Direction. Protection. And I realized something that made my chest feel strangely light. If I simply guarded this money for myself, my family would always see it as something to reclaim. But if I transformed it into something untouchable, something bigger than me, they'd lose their grip entirely. The next morning, I called Rebecca Martinez. "I want to set something up," I said. Her voice sharpened with interest. "What kind of something?" "A foundation," I replied. "A scholarship fund." She didn't interrupt. "For young women," I continued. "Girls who don't have families willing to protect their futures." There was a pause. Then Rebecca smiled through the phone. I could hear it. "Your great-aunt would have liked that," she said. Using half of my settlement money, I established the Victoria Harrington Educational Foundation. We worked with Wayne State to structure it properly. Airtight, protected, irrevocable, 20 scholarships a year, full tuition, no family access, no loopholes. When the paperwork was finalized, I felt something I hadn't felt since before the bank teller spoke. Peace. The fallout was immediate. My phone exploded. My parents were furious. Brandon accused me of choosing strangers over blood. Aunt Denise said I'd thrown the family away. But beneath the anger was something else. Shock. They hadn't expected this move. They'd expected me to fold, to redistribute, to cave. Instead, I'd made the money unreachable, permanent, untouchable. For the first time since this all began, they had no angle left. No leverage, no claim. And in that silence, sharp, stunned, absolute, I knew one thing for certain. They could never steal from me again. The first scholarship ceremony was scheduled for October. Rebecca suggested a conference room. Wayne State offered an auditorium. I chose the auditorium because this wasn't a quiet apology tour or a compromise disguised as generosity. This was a declaration. We held it on what would have been Great Aunt Victoria Harrington's 95th birthday. That part was intentional. The week leading up to the ceremony, my phone stayed eerily silent. No calls from my parents, no texts from Brandon, no cousins testing the waters with fake congratulations. They knew, and for the first time since this nightmare began, they had nothing to say. On the morning of the ceremony, I stood backstage holding a program with Victoria Harrington Educational Foundation, inaugural scholarship awards printed across the top. 20 names were listed beneath it. 20 young women, different majors, different neighborhoods, different stories. But all of them carried the same fragile hope I'd carried into that bank months ago, the belief that their future was real and worth protecting. Zoe sat in the front row with her parents, beaming like this was their own child's graduation. Rebecca Martinez sat beside them, composed but visibly proud. Several of my professors waved when they saw me peek out from behind the curtain. Daniel was there too. We'd had hard conversations over the past few months, honest ones, painful ones. Maya was no longer in the picture, not because I demanded it, but because Daniel finally understood that loving someone meant shielding them, not explaining away discomfort. We weren't perfect, but we were real. As I stepped onto the stage, the room quieted. For a moment, the weight of it all pressed against my chest. The courtroom, the phone calls, the accusations, the isolation. Then I thought about Victoria, about her hands guiding mine when I was little, about the fire in her voice when she said, "Not you girls." And I spoke. "I was raised in a family that believed sacrifice was love," I said, "especially when it came from women, especially when it was quiet." I told them about Victoria, not the legend, but the woman. The girl pulled from school, the doctor who refused to forget where she came from. I didn't name my parents. I didn't name the lawsuit. I didn't have to. This foundation exists, I continued, because education shouldn't be conditional. It shouldn't depend on someone else's priorities. And it should never be treated like a resource that can be taken when it's convenient. The first scholarship recipient walked across the stage. Then the second. Then the third. By the time the 20th young woman accepted her award, the auditorium was on its feet. I was crying openly now, tears I didn't bother wiping away. My parents weren't there. Neither was Brandon. Most of my blood family chose absence over acknowledgement. But as I watched those women stand together, clutching certificates that represented choice, real, protected choice, I understood something with devastating clarity. Family isn't who you bleed for. It's who refuses to bleed you dry. In the weeks that followed, the reaction was split, just like everything else had been. Some relatives were furious I'd given away money that could have helped the family. Others didn't know what to say at all. But something had shifted. The calls stopped. The requests dried up. They couldn't ask for what no longer belonged to me. And slowly the loneliness loosened its grip. I built a life that didn't require permission. Classes, late-night study sessions, foundation meetings, new friendships formed without history attached. I wasn't anyone's cautionary tale anymore. I was proof. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about the girl who walked into the bank that June morning, dressed for a future she thought was waiting politely for her. She had no idea how hard she'd have to fight, or what she'd lose, or what she'd build instead. Great Aunt Victoria saved money to give me choices. I used those choices to give 20 other women the same chance, every single year. The family that rejected me for fighting for my future can stay angry if they want. I have a new family now, one built on boundaries, on intention, on the belief that no one gets to steal your life and call it love. And that victory, quiet, permanent, and unbreakable, was worth everything it cost me.